Hello. Hi guys. I hope the audio is coming fine. Hope you all hit refresh once so that you all actually can see the live stream starting. Thanks for joining the live stream on a dark day. Usually, when strange, violent things or insanely unprecedented things happen these days in the world, most of that works to India's advantage in some way or the other, because these things always shift the world order to change in some different ways. And any question regarding changing the existing world order, the right answer is today Bharat. Except this occasion has bad consequences for, I think, every country. And we are going to live react to a specific interview by Dr. Jordan Peterson, who, for those of you who don't know, he was a lifelong clinical psychologist, and these days he's sort of a motivational speaker, but mainly still he delves into meaning of life and how to get together your life, etc., those things. And he delves into the subject called apologetics in Christianity, which we derisively call them Christian apologist. Now, apologist is a term usually reserved for people who are defending something indefensible, but apologetics is actually a very specific academic division inside Christianity studies. Okay, so he went and visited the Prime Minister of Israel sometime back, I think 5 or 6 months back. But this is an interview a little before that. He interviewed him via social media, via Zoom call or whatever, and this Prime Minister of Israel gave a brilliant interview. I have seen about half of it, and I think all of us should watch it. And there are obviously most things are relevant to India and Hindus especially. Their histories, what their existing problems today are, what are the accusations against the state of Israel, the nation called Israel, everything, and even the conspiracy theory accusations against Jews. All those are relevant or similar to Hindus, and we will see where are our in which situations we are better off, maybe in which situations we are worse off based on the things said by this Prime Minister. Now, we don't have to hero worship this Prime Minister because he has plenty of corruption cases against him. Okay, who knows if they're true or not? But his arguments are pretty much agreed upon by every Jew in the world today, except far left commie Jews like Nawaz Lapidi, who was the director who said that Kashmir Files is a horrible film, etc. Except those people, most of them, most Jews everywhere in the world, liberal, right winger, whatever, they agree with whatever Netanyahu said. And that's why we are going to listen to this interview, because it's a gist of the entire history of the Israel-Palestine conflict. And for those of you who hate Jordan Peterson, the accusation against Jordan Peterson regarding from vis-a-vis Hindus is that from time to time he gets things wrong about Hinduism. I don't care about that too much, because most Hindus get things wrong about Hinduism. If you asked people in Kolkata, devout Hindus who take selfies on Ashtami, 5 things about Hinduism, they'll get probably 5 things wrong. Okay, so I don't care about that, because he was a lifelong academic. He recently gave up his tenure in University of Toronto because his life outside of it is so much successful, and inside it is all wokeism and social justice bullshit going on. So he doesn't want to associate with those people. But before that, until then, he was mainly coming in contact with Hinduism studies folk or Indian academics, all of whom were fucking Marxists. So where is he going to know the real Hinduism? He's not going to speak. He didn't know J. Sai Deepak, right? So I don't blame him for getting 1 or 2 things wrong about Hinduism. But other than that, even Jordan Peterson is not the important factor here, nor is whether Benjamin Netanyahu is a great human being or not. We are focused today on Israel's right to exist and Israel's history of conflict with Palestine and how that's relevant to India and Bharat. Nothing more, nothing less than that. And when I say that almost every Jew in the world agrees with what Netanyahu said, for an example, I can give you. Just yesterday, 6:30 p.m. Okay, in Patrick Bet-David's podcast, which is one of my favorite podcasts, all of them are basically Republicans. One guy in the host team of Patrick Bet-David is a guy called Adam. He is still a Democrat. Okay, he's a liberal. He was asked near the end of the interview, what are your thoughts on this Israel-Palestine conflict that has recently started? He gave the same history and said that this is our problem and we must look for a solution here. So he's a lifelong Democrat. Patrick Bet-David and all, they are all Republicans. But he even agrees with the same history of Israel that any legit historian agrees, except some commie academics that have come up with the fascinating new history of Israel-Palestine conflict just about 50 or 100 years back. So let's start the interview. And I think I'm not an alarmist ever, but I think now we are pretty surely heading towards World War III. We might be in the middle of it, because World War III, World War I, or any big revolution, these things don't happen one fine morning with a declaration that, yeah, we are starting World War I. Conflicts keep happening everywhere, and then one sudden gigantic unprecedented fuse goes off, and everyone picks their own team and starts fighting each other. And unprecedented things which you would have thought up until 5 or 10 years back that how can this happen? These sorts of things are going on happening, okay, all around the world. These things point to something, that some gigantic tectonic shift is going on in the world. See, a nation head like Trudeau randomly accusing India of a extrajudicial crime. Then, on the other hand, India standing up to all the biggest countries, okay, telling USA, we can't help it, we'll take oil from Russia, telling Canada, fuck off. These are all unprecedented events. Then even domestic politics of other countries are pretty unprecedented. Look at what's going on with Trump. One after the other insane, hilarious false accusations against a former president. These are unprecedented events. These things piss off people to large extents. These are the things that lead to world wars, okay? So unprecedented things are what we need to take note of. Then, just last week, what happened? In the US Congress, the sitting Republican Speaker of the House got kicked out by other Republicans, the Trump faction of the Republican Party, which is unprecedented in American history. The last time this happened was because the speaker had TB. Okay, so we need to take note of these things. And if World War III happens, no one's better off. Most of all because our Indian soldiers will die. Let's check some comments. I think wait for some time to understand the geopolitics. Follow Vidur Niti, they've clearly explained it. Some Emiratis were supporting Israel on Twitter. Yeah, so far Kuwait has supported, Qatar has supported, Iran has supported. I don't think Saudi Arabia, I'm not sure what Saudi Arabia said. I don't think Saudi Arabia is dumb enough to support Palestine in 2023. Israel demolished Islamic National Bank. Namaskar Maximus. I have been promoted to customer from the company I worked for. নমস্কার রুদ্রজিৎ, প্রণাম দাদা, ভয়ঙ্কর ছবি এসছে, মনে হচ্ছে মিডিভাল যুগের। yes. Well, Jordan Peterson is wrong only about Hindu Dharma, everything else is correct. So yeah, exactly. Because like we have discussed countless times, Islamic studies, Christianity studies, Judaism studies, Marxism, political science, all these are studied and propagated by believers of those faith systems, except Hinduism. So he will obviously get things wrong about Hinduism. Jay Sai Deepak recently requested both in Sringeri and Palakkad to not upload his lectures in YouTube. He supposedly gave many strategies. This is the first conflict of old and new world order. 2024 is a big key. Amen. Saudi Arabia blamed Israel in press briefing though. Saudi is silent supporter of Israel. Yeah, like when Pakistan said that, why are you sending diplomats to Kashmir during G20? They didn't send the diplomats, but they sent their state-sanctioned businessmen to G20. World War III is inevitable. Those who believe Fukuyama's end of history or Steven Pinker's are idiots. Yeah. After yesterday, I'm sure World War III is coming soon. Unless we are in the middle of it already. If not, it's coming in the next 10 years. And one would think that at least this, whatever the visuals are coming from Israel, just half an hour back, a great female vocalist is in my friend list. She's an Israeli woman. She is in the music arrangement assisting team of Hans Zimmer. Okay, so she lives in LA. I added her because I had seen some of her fascinating singing performances in Berklee College of Music. She just posted that one of her close friends got shot dead. He was just cycling around on the streets. So it's absolutely random people getting killed in Israel. Okay, horrifying situations. So, but you would think that now commies would say that, yeah, Palestine is wrong. No. Now they get an even bigger excuse to say, see, all this while Israel was doing so many bad things, you didn't stand up for them. You kept quiet. So now it's the weaker Palestine standing up against the evil supremacist colonizer Israel. Okay. There's a famous term always used by Bengali politicians whenever someone's asked that why did your party people kill this guy. They start off with je kono mrityui dukkhojonok, that any death is unfortunate, and then they'll get to justifying why their party people killed this particular person. So it's like that yeah, maybe some people are dying in Israel, any death is unfortunate, but you see present sir, Madras Musings, hi. Okay, let's start the live stream. Let's start the reaction.
I was very much struck by how the translation of the biblical writing.
Yes, Parakram Divya, what he's saying is absolutely right, and it has happened not just one day, it has happened for decades and centuries.
Jump-started the development of literacy across. We have to do something with it that's productive. And so that's at least part of the claim you're making at the moment. It seems to be something intrinsic to it, and someone comes and squats on it.
At least a sense of that.
If you own territory, a vast swath of land, and you're doing nothing to it, and someone comes and squats on it and spends a lot of time improving it, at some point they actually develop a valid legal claim to the property itself. And so there seems to be something intrinsic to our notion of valid ownership, that if you're going to occupy territory, you actually have to do something with it that's productive. And so that's at least part of the claim you're making at the moment, to buttress the notion that the Jewish people have a valid claim to the present territory. There were a lot of movement back and forth, but the Jews have actually taken the land and made something of it.
Well, I'm saying something else, though. I'm saying that they held the land for 2,000 years, were kicked out. The Arabs came and conquered it and immediately lost it to others and did nothing with it. The others did nothing with it. So it was basically, they took over my apartment, okay, a long time ago. The guys who took over, who basically kicked me out, were kicked out themselves. The apartment was left barren, and many decades, in this case centuries later, I come back to this barren mess, okay, this ruin, and I build it up back, and I not only improve it, I not only make my ownership based on improvement, but then nobody else did anything with it. There was no someone else. There practically were no tenants there. That's my argument.
Watching and listening, I'm always excited to talk to the guests that I'm talking to, which is why I bring them on the podcast to begin with. But today we have something that I think is unique. I'm going to be speaking with Benjamin Netanyahu, who was recently reelected as Prime Minister of Israel. This is a very interesting development as far as I'm concerned. It's the first time I've had the opportunity to speak with someone who is a sitting head of state or soon will be. And I think the reason that that's relevant and worthy of note is because it's one of the markers for the development of a new kind of political dialogue. We're in a situation now where it's possible to sit with a political leader and have a genuine conversation for a long period of time. We'll go at least 90 minutes, unscripted, so that there's no soundbite quality or editing to it. You just get the unvarnished, make decisions that affect all of us. And so I'm very excited about this. I'll read the bio and then we'll go on to the interview. Benjamin Netanyahu, as I said, was recently reelected as Prime Minister of Israel, having previously served in the office from 1996 to 1999 and 2009 to 2021. From 1967 to 1972, he served as a soldier and commander in Sayeret Matkal, an elite special forces.
Look at his bio, guys.
Forces unit of the Israel Defense Forces. A graduate of MIT, he served as Israel's ambassador to the
graduate of MIT as well. And I have one other reason of doing a live reaction of this specific interview, because Netanyahu is very clear. He very, very clearly points out, I think about twice in the interview until I've seen, that capitalism, free market economics was absolutely necessary, was absolutely unputdownable for their rise and for their existence and for their strength that they have today. Free market capitalism was one of the main contributors for that. You can't do that with, he calls it semi-socialism. And what we have basically, we have semi-socialism today. And he says that you cannot have strength of your country, strength of your military by taxing the rich, because they will simply leave where there are countries that won't tax them as much. Rich people can leave. poor people can't leave. Okay? Capitalism is the best thing that can happen to poor people.
UN from 84 to 88, before being elected to the Israeli parliament as a member of the Likud party in 1988. He has published 5 previous books on terrorism and Israel's quest for peace and security. He lives in Jerusalem with his wife, Sarah. In his newest book, Bibi, My Story, the newly re-elected prime minister tells the story of his family, his people, his path to leadership, and his unceasing commitment to defending his country and securing its future. Hello, Prime Minister Netanyahu. Thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me
What
tonight.
a bio for a prime minister. It doesn't, he may be caught up today, but at least look at his qualifications.
I've been reading your book, your new book, Bibi, My Story, and it weaves an interesting personal tale, familial tale, and political cultural tale all together. And there is one particular element of it I wanted to begin discussing with you that's, I think, of broad interest. One of the things I realized when I was reading was just how ignorant I am in some fundamental sense about the history of the development of the Jewish state of Israel. And I know that there's tremendous constant noise about issues as fundamental as Israel's right to exist even. And you start by talking about, in your book, you embark on explaining that, at least in some part, by talking about Herzl and his terror that anti-Semitism, that the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe was going to cause a catastrophe, which was obviously a justified terror. Would you be kind enough to walk me and my viewers and listeners through your rationale for the moral justification for Israel, the political justification as well? And I'm going to do what I can to my limited ability, let's say, to push back. I've heard the arguments of often young people who are more prone to give credence and sympathy, say, to the Palestinian viewpoint. And I'd like to rectify my ignorance and maybe help my viewers and listeners do the same thing. So would it be useful to start with Herzl?
Well, I'd start, Herzl was
As far as I remember, Herzl was the guy, right, who said that Hebrew needs to be brought back. Hebrew needs to be brought back, and he died before Hebrew was brought back. He said that without Hebrew, Judaism won't survive. And after he died, his dreams were realized. Herzl is that guy, right?
was what I call our modern Moses. But I'd actually start with the original Moses. The Jewish people have lived in the land of Israel, what is now the state of Israel, have lived here and have been attached to this place for about 3,500 years, 3.5 millennia. Now, for the first 2 millennia, roughly, of that time, we were living in what is described in a text commonly known as the Bible. So the Bible describes...
Now, all that 3,500 years, okay, all of them were not even Jews in that place, in that locality. Some of them worshipped Allat, Al-Manat, Al-Uzza. In those days, they had great relations with the land area called Bharat, okay? Those were the days when Arab traders were coming and going. Some of them had families here. Some of them started living here from those days itself. And therefore, when Islam arrived and the pagans of those lands had to flee, the Jews of those lands had to flee, all of them came to Bharat. And they concluded that Allat, Al-Manat, Al-Uzza are also hiding in Somnath temple, because when they came by sea to trade here, the first thing they saw in front of their face was the beautiful, gigantic Somnath temple. And all of them worshipped here. Not the Jews, maybe. The non-Jews, of course. So when they got kicked out by their fellow countrymen, they came here. And they theorized that their goddesses also sought refuge in Somnath temple, which is why after that all Muslim kings first and foremost sought to destroy the Somnath temple, because those previous past pagan goddesses were also hiding in Somnath temple.
How the Jewish people lived on this land, were attached to this land, fought off conquerors, sometimes were conquered, but stayed on their land. And that continued for a very long time, until roughly the 7th century, actually, after the birth of Christ, okay? For roughly 2,000 years. We were conquered by the Romans, we were conquered by the Byzantines. They did a lot of bad things to us, but they didn't really exile us, contrary to what people think, okay? The loss of our land actually occurred when the Arab conquest took place in the 7th century. The Arabs burst out from Arabia, and they did something that no other conqueror, not the Romans, not the Byzantines, not the Greeks before them, not Alexander the Great, nobody did before. They actually started taking over the land of the Jewish farmer. They brought in military colonies that took over the land. And gradually over the next...
What is he talking about? What is this called? This is called settler colonialism. And not one colonialism studies professor in the world will use this term for the incident he just described, as they won't for the Islamic invasions that happened in India, nor will they call the Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan of today settled colonies. Okay, they are settled by descendants of those colonizers. They have converted the entire region to the religion of the colonizer. That is literally the definition of settler colonizers, and they won't talk about it.
2nd century, the Jews became a minority in our land. So it is under the Arab conquest that the Jews lost their homeland. The Arabs were the colonials. The Jews were the natives dispossessed. Well, that happens in history.
There's one important distinction he's clearly making. He is insanely articulate, okay? It's going to be tough for anyone to beat him in a debate, first of all. He has tremendous grasp on the topic. Maybe all Jews do, except the commies. But so far, he's not saying Muslims. I think he never says Muslim in the entire interview. I haven't seen it in its entirety, but he's saying Arabs very specifically. The reason for that is because later on, when Turks, Ottomans, they also came and kicked out the Arabs, they were also Muslims. So it's not just that Muslims were the problem, because other Muslims came and kicked out the Arabs themselves.
The Jews were dispossessed. We were flung to the far corners of the earth, suffered unimaginable suffering because we had no homeland. But we didn't disappear, and we never gave up the dream of coming back to our ancestral homeland. So generation after generation, Jews could be in Warsaw, they could be in Yemen, they could be in China, and they said, next year in Jerusalem, we'll come back next year in Jerusalem. Well, that was made possible because the Arabs who had conquered the land basically left it barren. They never made it their own. It was a barren land. It really it was an empty land. And
as is Pakistan today, as is Afghanistan today. They took it from us, they annexed it, colonized it, settled there, then fucked the country completely. I have a close friend who's not very far left commie. He's kind of a true centrist, okay, and believes in capitalism, etc. He also says that what's the point of talking about Pakistan? What's the point of even thinking of getting back Pakistan or even getting back POK? Have you seen those lands? Those lands are barren, devastated lands. What's the point of getting them back? Well, Israel was also a barren land. What was the point of getting it back? See what they created after getting that barren land back. You can do things in barren lands as well.
The 19th century, the idea of coming back next year in Jerusalem became a reality. By the way, in part because of Christian Zionist support for the idea of the Great Return. The Jews came back in the 19th century to the land of Israel. The result of this return was that we started building farms, factories, places of employment.
Well, he gives Christian Zionists some credit here because he's talking to a Christian apologist here. But he will not mention Hindus or Bharat as far as I've seen in the interview, because he's after all a politician, and he's playing to the room, basically playing to the crowd here, because Jordan Peterson is sitting in front of him. If an Indian or a Hindu was sitting in front of him, he would also bring in the point that yes, and in those toughest days of Jews, there was only one society, one country in the entire fucking world who did not harm Jews, and that was us. And we never had a problem with those minorities.
Arabs from nearby countries started immigrating, and they called themselves Palestinians. They reconstructed history and said, we've been here for centuries. No, they haven't. They weren't there at all, and they didn't have a national consciousness. We came back, made it our land, and we said, okay, we will live together.
Yeah, we like just last day, those three guys who were debunking J. Sai Deepak, one of them was saying that Indian characteristics or the idea of India is not just Hindus. It's all British. It's Adivasis, Dalits. No, not Dalits. He said Dravidian identity. Indian identity is not just Hindu identity. It's also Muslim identity. Since everyone came and called it their own, therefore all of that's Indian identity. Okay. So his argument is settler colonialism is to be glorified. Settler colonialism is the identity of that land. Okay. That might work in USA because they have demolished the Native American population. How can that work in India when the original people who lived here are still the majority? Okay, even if you believe in Aryan migration theory, migration theory, it's not invasion. It's a consensus that no invasion happened. Even that happened about 3,000, 4,000 years back. So how are you going to say that the guy who came here 200 years back, 500 years back is the same as the guy who came here 4,000 years back, when we have documented evidence after documented evidence that the people who came here 200 years back, 500 years back have done horrific genocides and mass murders and taxed the natives of this land, force them to pay jizya? How are they same as the people who came 4,000 years back? They just came here and started calling it their own land one fine morning, as Netanyahu is pointing out about Palestinians, and that's not the same. That's just settler colonialism.
We decided to establish a state in 1948. That's 75 years ago. And we said everybody can live here. The Arabs said there can't be a Jewish state. You have no right to be here. It's our land. It's not your land. It's been our land for 3,500 years.
Yes.
If you took over somebody's apartment, knocked them out, dispossessed them, and they never gave up the claim. They said it's our claim, and you left this barren dump. Okay, and the families, the progeny of the people you kicked out, came back, rebuilt the house. You cannot come back and tell them you don't belong here. We're going to kick you out, especially since you're latecomers who've come to live in part of the house, which is what the so-called Palestinians are. Okay, we say to them, you can live here, we can live here, but it's our land,
yes.
It's our state. And the reason this conflict continues is because the Palestinians, who represent the colonial powers, the Arab conquest of the Middle East and beyond, they're saying, you have no right for a Jewish state. Well, we do. If any people has any right to a state, if any people never gave up their dreams of returning to their ancestral home, if any people rebuilt their home from nothing, from barren, wasted land, it's the Jewish people. To tell them, you have suffered more than anyone else. You have never lost your dream of coming back and rebuilding your national life in your ancestral homeland. You have no right to be there. But the Arabs who are trying to destroy you, they have that right. That is a complete perversion of history and also a complete perversion of justice. The Jews belong to this land belongs to the Jews. The Palestinians are free to live here next to us, among us, but they're not free to demand the dissolution of the Jewish state. That is not justice, that is injustice. That's the shortest lecture.
And here we need to point out the entire CA and RC concept. That again, the last day's live stream where those three people were debunking J. Deepak, one of them said that CA and RC, or specifically NRC, is where Muslims are excluded from appealing about their lost citizenship, etc. Those Muslims who are proven to be not from India, or who are mistakenly claimed to be not from India. That is fundamentally against the secularism of India. And if it's a mistake, then I think the mistake should be rectified, because now there's no point kicking out Indian Muslims. But what is fundamentally about unsecular about NRC CA, other than not rectifying mistakes? Okay, mistakes meaning kicking out actual Indian citizens, Indian Hindu citizens or Muslim citizens, and kicking them out by mistake, claiming them to be from Pakistan or Bangladesh. Other than that, is what can be unsecular about that? Because our secularism word came to the constitution in the 70s. Before that, what were we? A Hindu Rashtra? Or were we a Hindu fascist Rashtra? Other than that, the more important part in relevance to today's discussion is that there is no mention of secularism in Israel's constitution, right? Israel is basically a first world country in the middle of a shithole desert, okay? It has first world amenities, it has great GDP per capita, it has great innovation, it has great education, it has great gender equality, okay? It has a great military. What doesn't it have? So many Indian kids today go to even Tel Aviv University to study. So 7 Nepali students from Nepal died yesterday. All of these people are going to Tel Aviv University to study, right? Christians inside Israel, Muslims inside Israel are extremely happy. They have a free society to practice whatever they want. They just cannot call for any sort of violence against the existing state of Israel. That's the only condition they have to meet. My point is, the fact that they don't have the word secular or secularism in any way in their constitution or in their body politic, how is that stopping you as a non-Jew from any part of the world having a good life in Israel? When you go to study in Tel Aviv, are you facing any problem? When the non-Jews are living in Israel or working in Israel, are they having any problem? Are they facing any problem? No. Not one single man or woman can claim that. So why do we need to stick to the word secularism to maintain secularism? The word is just a perversion. I know all of you know this, but I'm still making the point with the hope that some fucking commie watches my live stream someday.
I can give you about Jewish history.
In today's world, we sometimes lose sight of the Judeo-Christian beliefs that built our society. Do the studies measure the birth of Jesus? 5. Download yourself the gift.
Palestinians were you.
Christmas. Go to hallow.com/Jordan today.
So why do you think the claim that the Palestinians were somehow there in Israel first and have been displaced in a colonial occupation, let's say, by the Jews, why do you think that idea has gained such cachet, not least in the West?
Because of ignorance? I mean, what do you mean they were here first? Well, you know, you're familiar with the story of Jesus, right? Jesus was a Jewish rabbi.
No, it's not just ignorance. It's not just ignorance. Netanyahu maybe knows it but won't get into it because that's a whole lot of accusations and speculations. Since I have the privilege of not being a prime minister of a country, I will say what is it. It's not ignorance. It's just that sympathy-based game plan of commies, okay? The worldview of you being the savior, okay? That's it. They just saw with their eyes that, yes, Palestinians are poor. Garib logo ka kya hoga? It's that same nonsense. The fake sympathy for poor people, which is why they hate Israel. If in the same situation, with the same histories, if Palestine was a superior successful state and Israel was a poor state, they would not have said these things about Israel, but at the same time, they would not take the side of Israel then, okay? They would still claim Palestine is oppressed here because Muslims in general all over the world are very poor. They don't take part in the mainstream society, education, business that much. That's why they remain poor. So based on that, based on the world scenario of Muslims, they would still say that Israel is a weak country, but fuck them. Palestine is the one we need to worry about. But here, the main problem is that Israel is successful in itself.
2,000 years ago. He was a rabbi from the Galilee, okay? He came to Jerusalem, he turned the money tables of the tables of the money changers on the Temple Mount. Where did that happen? Did it happen in Tibet? It happened here. Jerusalem was our capital. King David made it our capital 3,000 years ago. So the Jews are here. To try to say that they weren't here and that the Palestinians were here thousands of years ago is ridiculous. Anybody who you can actually Google this and find out how absurd this thing is. So as far as reinventing ancient history, that is...
We have countless absurd histories taught to us as well. It's just that we didn't even know they were absurd. That's the problem with our education system. We are now realizing what hilarious absurd things we were taught.
Unpardonable, because anybody can find out and understand that the Jews were here for thousands of years, the Palestinians weren't here. As far as modern times are concerned, what the Palestinians have said is, and I write this in my book, and I show it because it's so comical. What they say is, we were here. Palestine was a verdant land in the 19th century, teeming with the Palestinians until the Jews came in, took it over, and threw it out. Okay, well, that's what Arafat effectively said in his infamous speech in the United Nations, blaming Zionism, equating Zionism with racism. Well, there's only one problem.
You all know who Arafat is, right? I'm from a commie family, so I grew up revering Arafat as a great humanitarian and leader who believes in a lot of humanity, nice things. Yasser Arafat is the guy. He was worshipped by Indian commies.
He said that the Jewish invasion of this verdant Palestinian homeland happened in 1881, okay? The problem with that is that 12 years before, a famous visitor, among hundreds of visitors, named Mark Twain, visited the Holy Land. And he describes a totally different picture. He describes Palestine, I'm quoting him, is a vast wasteland. He said, only imagination can grace this barren land with the pomp of circumstance and life. It's just, he said, we traveled for a whole day. We didn't see, in the Galilee, we didn't see a human being, one single human being. He said, Jerusalem sits in sackcloth and ashes. And as he was saying that, it's the Jewish return that began. The Jewish return that began building the land. Well, perhaps one could argue.
You all know what Mark Twain said about India, right? Google it.
It's obvious that Mark Twain was not in the service of the Jewish state because it didn't exist. He wasn't in the service of the Jewish lobby because there wasn't any Jewish lobby. He was just reporting what was there. Could there possibly have been a tremendous influx of Palestinians between 1869 and 1881, the year that Arafat says the Jewish invasion began and destroyed the Palestinian paradise? Well, alas, no. Because in the year 1881, another famous visitor visits Israel, and he writes, visits this land. And he writes also his memoirs, okay? His name was Arthur Penrhyn Stanley. He was a very famous courtier of Queen Victoria's court, okay? And he came here on a special visit. And he says, I looked south and I looked north. He says, I'm in Judea. And I see nothing. He says, a barren expanse. And they both express, both Twain and Arthur Penrhyn Stanley say the same thing. When will the Jews come back and bring this land to life? And the answer is right then. We came back, brought it back to life. There were Arabs living here, but it was, as I say, a barren wasteland. But Arabs began to immigrate naturally because we created a rise in the standard of living that attracted Arabs from neighboring states. Those Arabs are now the descendants of those Arabs who migrated as a result of the Jewish return. Many of them now are considered Palestinians. So what I'm saying, and I'm saying this to you, Jordan, and to your audience, there's been a complete fabrication of history. It's the biggest lie.
Yes, aren't we familiar with that? Complete fabrication of history. And I love my comment section so much. This is why. Because I'm not very fluent at monologues as of yet, right? But you guys are giving me so many great tangents to go off on. So, what Shaptarshi is saying, Yasser Arafat who won the Nobel Peace Prize while having gun with him. So, Nobel Peace Prizes are hilarious, guys. Obama won it. Nobel Peace Prizes are absolutely, it's sort of a dhabba. It shows that you are basically against peace. And what was Barack Obama given a Nobel Peace Prize for? Just because he was black. He had no achievements. He was a one-term senator, became president. That was his life's biggest achievement. And a great speech written by a great speechwriter who was probably a graduate in English literature from Harvard. Maybe, I don't know who it was. But because of that great speech, he won a Nobel fucking Peace Prize. Okay? I hope Modi never wins Nobel Peace Prize. And the next comment. RSB is saying, Yasser Arafat created Hamas, and when entire world was refusing to recognize his government, it was our great government that recognized his government. And yes, RSB, we are going to face problems because of that even today. Because the one thing that our country has kind of maintained is also, I mean, extremely non-Congress government has come to power only after 2014 and once with Atal Bihari Vajpayee, right? But other than that, all of them were basically socialists. Even Atal Bihari Vajpayee was a socialist in his mind. He just thought he can do socialism better than Congress. Narendra Modi was also like that only before he met Bibek Debra, Sanjeev Sanyal, these sorts of people. But on foreign policy, every country has to maintain some sort of uniformity, right? Every time a different political party comes to power, and all of a sudden your foreign policy can't become 180 degrees opposite. So we have to maintain a bit of that. Otherwise, no country in the world can take you seriously, because then they can't trust your country for doing long-term business with you, because who knows what the next party will come to power and do. So our political parties have set an example that no matter who comes to power, we will follow some sort of uniformity. And because of that goddamn uniformity, even today, our official position is in favor of Palestine, even though the general population of India knows that Israel is not to be blamed here. Israel is the victim here. Especially Hindus know it. So it's a hilarious situation that our state policy is that we believe in the freedom of Palestine, but the population electing that state power is in favor of Israel. So Modi has to do some monkey balancing and gradually shift it towards Israel somehow.
Of the big lies that have permeated the 20th century and the 21st century is to say that the Arabs were here before, that is, the Palestinians were here before the Jews, when we were here for thousands of years, that we are the colonials, when in fact it was the Arabs who were the colonials who dispossessed the original natives, and that is the Jews, that we came back to this land that was laid barren by the Arab conquest, brought it back to life, and allowed Arab immigration, what we call now Palestinian immigration, to come back in. And now they say to us, in unimaginable chutzpah, they say, you don't belong here. They recreate ancient history, they recreate modern history, and this is a lot of hokum. It's ridiculous. It's absurd.
Well, some of it also seems to be, I would say, technically speaking, something like a time frame problem. Right? I mean, you said the Arabs came in the 7th century, and that's a long time ago. And so,
yeah, some important comments have come. Let me just respond to them as well. I was RSB. He established. Wait. Oh, so many comments came. Yeah, Mark Twain, a great admirer of Hindus and Bharat, especially about Kashi. Yes. He established Black Friday. I was surprised to see how many right-wing Hindus couldn't accept the fact that India can face similar terrorism if the current government loses. Yeah. And I forgot the main point why I started this live stream, okay? Why I decided to do this live stream. My main point was, for those people who say, I'm shouting too much, right? The voice is clipping. Yeah. So my main point was that a stable Pakistan is in the best interests of India. That's the biggest bullshit in the world today. And see what's happening today. An unstable Palestine has harmed Israel to such an extent. What is a stable Palestine going to do? A stable Pakistan is not in our best interest. A devastated, barren Pakistan is in our best interest, where we have military bases.
From the 7th century to now, you might think of that as being a time frame long enough to allow for a valid claim of sovereignty ownership. But the Jews' rejoinder is, well, we have a much older claim than that, one that spans 3,500 years. And the problem I have with that conceptually, and then I'll get to some other issues that are relevant to this, is that it's not exactly obvious what time frame of analysis should be primary.
You have a very
and I don't really
point.
know how to solve that.
I do,
Yeah,
and I'll answer your question. It's a valid
Okay.
question. If the Arabs, having conquered the land in the 7th century and dispossessed the Jews over the next 2 centuries, the Jewish farmers kicked them out and so on, if they established a viable state, a viable national identity there and so on, you're right. These things happen in history. You're supplanted by another people, fine. But that's not what happened. The Arab conquerors themselves were replaced by other. First of all, they did nothing with the land. It's just barren. They actually built one town. It's called Ramle. That's it. Hundreds and hundreds of Jewish biblical sites and hundreds and thousands of new sites that we built. The Arabs built one place, one town called Ramle. That's it. So they did nothing with the land. Then they were replaced by other conquerors. Other conquerors came in. The Mamluks, the Ottomans, ultimately the British, a series of conquerors. In other words, they took over the land, lost the land, and did nothing with the land. So if they had done what you say, if they had created if that house that we were expelled from was taken over by another people, another family, they built a family there, they had children, grandchildren, they extended the porch, they built a parking garage and so on, it's gone. What can you do? You still have the ability to demand reclamations, compensation and so on. But, tough luck. That happens in history. But that's not what happened. Once the Jews were conquered by the Arabs did nothing with it, lost the land to others. Now we come back and bring it back to life 13 centuries later and perform this miracle. And they fabricate a history where we were there all the time. It was a verdant homeland. It was built up. It was nothing of the kind. It was desert. It was nothing. Now, it's not merely Mark Twain and Arthur Penryn Stanley who say that. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of travelogues over the centuries of famous French poets, of Swiss travelers, of German theologians, everybody, of poets, writers, travelers, who describe exactly the same thing. There was nothing there. There was no Palestinian state.
And our predicament is that our own conquerors, our own genocide creators, people who came here and our own settler colonizers are saying in their own documents, either written by themselves or written by their own fucking historians, that this was such a great country. Babar is saying that I hate the food here, I hate the culture here, I hate the music here, but man, this place has some great gold. And Kashmir is a heaven. Our colonizers are themselves saying that this is such a great place, but our commie fucking historians are saying everyone came, created a great culture, created a great place. After that, India became the great country it is today.
No Palestinians. They didn't even. The Arabs even didn't call themselves that. They were calling themselves parts of southern Syria, whatever. There was no national consciousness. There was nothing to form the consciousness about. In the 20th century, the Arab world and the Palestinians and their supporters in the West, among the intellectual elites, basically erased history and recreated a fake history. A fake history that deracinates the Jewish roots that are unparalleled. There is no other story in the history of nations where people fought for so long for their land, for 2,000 years, were dispossessed from
So, what's our relevance here? That we have also been deracinated, we have also lost our roots, but we still have some numbers. At the right last moment, Narendra Modi has come to power. I'm not going to give Narendra Modi credit for everything, but we can't ignore Narendra Modi from this equation for these conversations we are having today, Everything has, all these voices have gotten amplified because of Narendra Modi coming to power, The voices were there. Desai Deepak would still read those books. Sanjeev Sanyal would still exist. Sanjeev Sanyal wrote his major books before BJP came to power. But why this sudden scenario, entire scene of people talking about these things? That's obviously because of Narendra Modi, right? Now, Israel, by the time they created Israel, it was already almost a gone case, but they managed to save themselves because their number, their population, their land was so small. We still have a gigantic land. Look at Italy. No single Italian kid has been born in the entire country in the last 3 months. Can you believe that? Can you believe how devastating that is for a country? Meanwhile, Italy's island got basically invaded by illegal Muslim immigrants. So, their Giorgia Meloni coming to power, maybe even that's a little too late. Who knows? Let's see if Meloni can turn it around. I don't think she will be able to. But see, again commies. Again, another country that's going to hell. Italy, because of commies. Society can't tell me to have kids. Society can't tell me when to have kids. Okay. And having kids is bad for the environment. You should not have kids. There are not enough resources. What will poor people eat if all of you have so many kids? We have so much famines and starvation in Africa. Why should you have kids? So all these countries listen to these commies, then ask for Indian kids to come and settle there or study there because their population has gone to hell. Now Italy is facing the same thing.
Came back to it, did not kick out an existing population with a national consciousness, rebuilt the land, and now are being told you have no connections to it. You were, you're the colonials. No, we're not. We're not just to just.
Okay, sorry for interrupting once more. Oh, so Dharma Adhyatma, you are Bengali. That's great to hear that you know these things. And no, I'm not going to get into IAS at all. First of all, because I'm 32. But that's actually second of all. First of all, because if I go more than 2 or 3 days without music, I feel like puking. My body starts reacting. I genuinely can't live without making music. I get horrible vibes from my own body. It just feels strange to be alive without making music.
Just to give this. Just to give us a fine point, because this is so crucial, what we're discussing. And I discuss it at considerable length in my book because people are so ignorant of history. We are not the Belgians in the Congo. We're not the Dutch in Indonesia, okay? We're not the British in South Africa. We had been there all the time. We had been in the Congo. We had been, if you will, the equivalent in Indonesia. We were kicked out of the Congo and nothing happened in the Congo. Nothing. No other people there, no development, nothing. Okay, now we come back to our land, build it up, enable immigration from of Arabs, or now called Palestinians, from neighboring.
And as for Hindus, we didn't even leave. Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, they got converted, and still that's not called settler colonialism.
Lands, and they tell us, oh, you don't belong here, you dispossessed us. This is essentially what Arab propaganda and Palestinian propaganda has done, and what I labored not only in the present book, my own history, Bibi, my story, but in a previous book, A Place Among the Nations, to
Bibi is his nickname, you all know, right?
debunk. And you know what? The interesting thing is this, so far, it's quite amazing. No fact that I put forward in any of these books has ever been challenged. Not one. Not one. Usually, when people, Place Among the Nations.
See how that's similar. Who has challenged facts of J. Sai Deepak's book? Who has challenged facts of Sanjeev Sanyal's book? It's only their problem is that, no, he is not a sociologist. J. Sai Deepak is not a sociologist. Why should he write about this? He is not a history. Why should he speak about history? Why Sanjeev Sanyal is not a historian. Why should he speak about history? Okay, that's their sole complaint, that they are not credentialed. Like even yesterday, someone asked in my comment section, "What are your credentials?" So I said, I'm a curious guy with a great Wi-Fi. That's my credential. Sanjeev Sanyal has a better answer. He says that all the histories you read of British India, they were not written by British historians. They were all written by British bureaucrats and engineers, civil engineers. They were going around and finding these objects and therefore writing on it with their own passion and research. When did historians only become the sole custodians of history? Like V.S. Naipaul says that history is too important to be left just to historians.
Previous book answering much of the questions that you asked, usually polemical books are challenged. The critics, and in my case, critics from the left, they'd find, some straggler, some factoid that is wrong, some formulation that is unfortunate, and so on, okay? Nothing. Nobody ever challenged it. It got, in those days, rave reviews from the New York Times, from great writers like Connor Cruz O'Brien and Paul Johnson and others. These are great writers, and it wasn't challenged, okay? My current book has not been challenged on historical facts. Nothing. People can argue about my opinions, but they don't argue about my facts. Try to be very rigorous about the facts. This whole attack on the Jewish people's right to live in the Jewish homeland, the attempt to erase the Bible and to erase the history after the Bible, and to create a modern fantasy that doesn't exist, based on the Palestinians who want to destroy us, who support terrorism, who are anti-democratic, who are or basically neo-colonials, because they're really the colonials. That is something that I think has, it's not merely folly. It has something fundamentally wrong morally, because it is both untrue and unjust.
Shopify is the all-in-one commerce platform trusted by millions of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, Shaptoshi Singh, but communists are not theologians, yet they speak. So, first of all, they are theologians, but they're theologians of their religion called Marxism, and in their church of Marxism, with their Lord and Savior being Saint Karl Marx. But when it comes to Hinduism, I know commies will say that it's not about believing in that history. How can you believe that? If you just believe in the magic that magic and all the stupid rituals that every religion propagates, you will just come up with further bullshit research. So it's better that a Marxist writes that the religion studies of that particular religion, because they will have an objective lens to talk about it. Okay, and more importantly, you have to prevent Brahminical hegemony in studying Hinduism, right? Therefore, it's better that Marxists do it.
The claim so far, if I'm going to say lean in the direction of your argument without leaning too far and too obviously, I would say it's something like this, and tell me if I've got it right. There's a host of competing claims to the territory that now constitutes Israel. And you could have some debate about, perhaps technically, about which of those claims should reign supreme. The additional case that you make, however, is that the Israelis, the Jews, have done a tremendous amount of work in improving this territory. And I know there's a principle of ownership in Western common law, in English common law, and I'm not a lawyer, so I may muck this up to some degree, but I understand the principle. If you own territory, a vast swath of land, and you're doing nothing to it, and someone comes and squats on it and spends a lot of time improving it, at some point they actually develop a valid legal claim to the property itself. And so there seems to be something intrinsic to our notion of valid ownership, that if you're going to occupy a territory, you actually have to do something with it that's productive. And so that
is actually British common law, which to a large degree we also follow. This is why commies harp on the contributions of Islamic invaders to such an extent. You get it? This is why. So that no one can say that, yes, they just came here and did genocide. No. Aurangzeb played Veena. Okay? Islamic invaders were great poets. Sufi shairi. Khushbu. It's not khushbu. It has to be khushbu. You have to write Hindi songs that you can't even understand the words to half of it. Illahi mera ji aaye, hiriya. That's their contribution. So that becomes one extra layer of reason why they're not outsiders.
That's at least part of the claim you're making at the moment, to buttress the notion that the Jewish people have a valid claim to the present territory.
Well, and
there were a lot of movement back and forth,
yes,
but the Jews have actually taken the land and made something of it.
Well, I'm saying something else, though. I'm saying that they held the land for 2,000 years, were kicked out. The Arabs came and conquered it and immediately lost it to others and did nothing with it. The others did nothing with it. So it was basically, they took over my apartment, okay, a long time ago. The guys who took over, who basically kicked me out, were kicked out themselves. The apartment was left barren, and many decades, in this case centuries later, I come back to this barren mess, okay, this ruin, and I build it up back, and I not only improve it, I not only make my ownership based on improvement, but that nobody else did anything with it. There was no someone else. There practically were no tenants.
Right.
There. That's my argument.
Right. You're also making the case that when the Jews came to Israel, they were doing what they could to coexist with the people who were there, with a sparse number of people who were there, but also to set up a state that would invite other people who weren't Jewish to live there as well. So it wasn't an oppressive regime in any sense,
we know what happened.
Sense of the word.
We know what happened. We know that when 75 years ago, when the state of Israel was declared, you didn't have a single Arab refugee. I mean, the Arabs say now that their enmity to Israel, and the reason they went to war with Israel was because of the Arab refugee. But there wasn't a single Arab refugee or Palestinian refugee when Israel was established. In fact, the refugees are the result of Arab aggression and not its cause. And in fact, the Arab onslaught, 5 Arab armies that attacked the tiny Jewish state in its inception, these 5 Arab armies created 2 refugee problems. One, the Palestinian refugees who fled before the advancing armies, being promised that they could come back in a few days because the Jews would be annihilated, driven to the sea. That didn't work out, thank God. But in those 5 Arab states, there lived many Jews. those Jews were summarily kicked out after our War of Independence. So the Arab onslaught on Israel, on Israel's inception, produced two refugee problems. One, Palestinian refugees, Arab refugees, we call them Palestinians. And the second is Jewish refugees. Now, Israel, with less than 1% of the total landmass of the Arab states, takes in the same number of refugees, Jewish refugees, as you had Palestinian refugees. You don't see them here. They're integrated into our society, into our government, into business, into everything. We solved, without a cornucopia of Arab oil, we solved our refugee problem caused by the Arab onslaught on Israel. The Palestinian refugee problem is kept alive by the Arabs that have 100 times more land, infinite oil resources. They keep it alive as a battering ram.
Yes, problems are kept alive. Our caste problem can go away in 5 days because of Hindu unity and capitalism. And those Hindus today who are vehemently against castes intermingling amongst themselves will be basically ostracized by a majority of Hindutva folk themselves, and the rest of the society, though as it is pretends to be against casteism. But reservation has to end absolutely for that. Without ending reservation, you cannot have caste cohesion, and of course Hindu unity and capitalism. But these problems will be kept alive because the united Hindu is the end of Marxism and Islamism in the world.
Produce exactly the propaganda that you say. So basically what the technique of Arab propaganda has been, and I describe it to some extent in my in my biography too, because you have to understand it, you have to see it to believe it, is to turn the results of Arab aggression against Israel into its cause. They first did that with the refugees when Israel was established. They then didn't accept Israel's right to exist, even though we're a tiny country. They tried to attack us again 19 years later and destroy us. That's called the 6-Day Wars. In 6 days, we pushed back the Arab countries and took over our ancestral lands of Judea, Samaria. And again, what the Arabs did is exactly the same thing. They said that our occupation, our so-called occupation of the heartland of the Jewish people, Judea and Samaria, that produced the war. No, that didn't produce the war. It was a result.
See, USA's that deep state, who is still pro-war, who is against people like Vivek Ramaswamy and Donald Trump, they know their time is up. The jig is up, so to speak. Okay, which is why they are provoking a lot of subtle things. They are doing the Canada bullshit. I think they might have had some support for this Palestine attack on Israel, and they are sending their ambassador to Indian-occupied Kashmir as well. So if World War III happens, it's absolutely going to be because of USA's deep state once again.
Result of their second attempt to annihilate us. So this technique of reversing causality, that is accusing Israel, basically turning the results of Arab aggression into its cause, is again one of these ways of creating the delegitimization of Israel. The reason we have not had peace with the Palestinians is not because of the Arab refugees. There weren't any when they attacked us. The reason is not the territories. We didn't control these territories. They were in Arab hands before the 6-Day War. All of these things are a result of the Arab aggression. And what is the cause of the Arab aggression? It's the persistent Arab refusal to accept a Jewish state in any boundary in our ancestral homeland. And if you remove that, you get peace. Now, how do we know that we get peace? Because this persistent Arab refusal has dissipated. It's dissipated over time. As the strength of Israel, as I describe in my book, as Israel becomes not merely a fact, but a permanent fact in the Middle East, so they know they can't get rid of it. So Arab countries begin to make peace with us. And I had the privilege, which I describe again in my book, of forging 4 Arab peace agreements, 4 peace agreements with Arab states, because that barrier, that obstacle of refusing to accept a Jewish state at any boundary has disappeared. Where does it persist? In the Palestinians, who are 1 to 2% of the entire Arab world, wagging.
Yeah, as with India. Okay, Saudi Arabia is great friends with India. Indonesia is great friends. I don't know if it's great friends, but more or less ally. UAE is great friends with India. Oman is great friends with India. Pakistan ko solve. We need to solve the Kashmir issue. Uske baad, after that we will solve all our problems. Okay, so they are hell-bent on Kashmir. So wo to nahi hoga. And important points have come here. Saptarshi is saying United Hindu can also end BJP and bring some other unknown party who will listen to them. I think since there is an existing party machinery, it's better to hijack BJP and convert their ideologies, make them more free market, etc. Okay, or implosion within the BJP. Yes, that's what I think. RSB is saying US's deep state is behind this as per Vidurniti, and they explain it. Holy shit. So this idea just came to my mind off the top of my head. So yeah, I think that is the case. Good for Vidurniti.
It's the tail wagging the dog, or they tried until recently. They were quite successful in wagging the dog. Palestinians, cling on to the fantasy of eliminating Israel, denying us our historical and present rights to live anywhere in this land.
Yes, it's Palestine's Kashmir issue. So yeah, Shangramjit Raichaudhuri is saying Joe Biden made the decision to release $6 billion to the Islamic State Republic of Iran, and now Hamas, one of the terrorist proxies they brag openly about funding, yes, is launching a sophisticated and expensive attack on Israel. Damn, I did not know this part. Shit. So it's obviously US is doing, because they know their game is up. They have to do some bullshit now to again cause some disharmony in the world, because even the far left and the far right in USA have also united on countless things. They are saying that the government is oppressive. They are saying the Congress doesn't work. They are saying that the police is doing wrong things. Okay, they are saying that the establishment is not working in our favor. A lot of leftists were, even some true leftists today are against the war in Ukraine. The right wingers are saying the same thing. It's the Trump Vivek Ramaswamy faction of Republicans who are saying those things. It's the establishment Republicans who are still saying that no, we need to fund Ukraine, etc. So these interesting unities happening between people, okay, like Dismantle Hindutva Conference's problem with Hindu unity dismantling casteism. The problem with Hindutva is that the lower varnas, lower castes somehow feel a kinship with the upper varnas, and that is so wrong, because you still haven't gotten the justice of the oppression that happened to you at the hands of the upper varnas. So when people now I'm going to sound like a fucking commie now. When the real masses unite, it's the true state powers that tremble with fear. And now the unities were happening too much, so they know how else to play the game other than enhance all the disunities that we have in the world. Start World War III, so that we forget all these issues, so that American right-wingers forget the issues of Ukraine, gender ideology being taught, water, infrastructure of USA going to hell, their streets becoming third world shitholes. Let them forget all that. Let us Indians forget about Hindu unity, caste unity, and now just worship Modi for sending our troops and fighting in World War III.
Refusing to any kind of practical compromise, refusing to accept the declaration of Israel in the UN, the partition resolution, we did, they refused, refusing any kind of realistic negotiation for peace. What has happened, and here's what happened, Jordan. For the last quarter of a century, after the initial peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan, for 25 years we had no peace treaties with any Arab country, because the elites, the foreign policy elites and the experts and the intellectuals explained, you cannot make peace with the rest of the Arab world unless you make peace first with the Palestinians.
Yeah,
there's a problem.
This is the kind of bullshit that is told to us, that a stable Pakistan is in India's best interest.
Right.
Well, you can't, because the Palestinians are not interested in peace with Israel. They're interested in the peace without Israel. They're not interested in a state next to Israel. They're interested in a state instead of Israel. So if you wait for the Palestinians,
Kashmir is not their only demand. Kashmir is their latest demand. If you solve the Kashmir issue, then they will next ask for Himachal Pradesh.
Wait another quarter of a century, another half century, another century. You're not going to get anywher. I had to break that logjam, and I describe how I did that in my book. I had to go around the Palestinians, go to the United Arab Emirates, go Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, and make peace with them. Why did they change their attitude towards Israel? They changed it because of the growth of Israeli power. As Israel became more powerful technologically, we made a free market revolution that released the genius in our people. Israel became the innovation nation. You can't do that if you're paying 75% marginal tax rate. Right? So we got tax rates, put in basically a capitalist economy, and Israel exploded. But it also became very powerful.
That's the only thing Narendra Modi is not doing as of yet. He's gradually changing the idea, of course. I will agree 100% with that he's gradually shifting it, definitely. Now, libertarians might argue that it should have been done faster, and I'm somewhat of an agnostic on how fast that change needs to be, because people's habits can't change one fine morning, okay? So probably because of that, this gradual change is what is needed, but we need to keep pushing the idea that this change needs to happen. And I'm not sure if Narendra Modi is sure that change needs to happen. He's gradually shifting it to some degree, but I think that change needs to be a long change, okay? And this gradual shift needs to go on for a long while. I think Narendra Modi thinks that the change is near. We have almost arrived. No, that's not it. Income tax needs to be standardized up to 10 or 12% all over the country.
Militarily, because we could now afford to fund it. The combination of economic power through free markets and military and intelligence power that combined to give us diplomatic power. And with that, Arab leaders
And that cannot happen without capitalism. This is Israel's own prime minister saying it, that this is how we did it, guys. We could not have done it without capitalism.
The area began to see Israel not as their enemy, but as their indispensable ally against a force that was threatening both Israel and them, and that's Iran's aggression. And secondly, they saw the innovation nation that is Israel as a fount of tremendous technology that could better the lives of their people.
Yeah.
And therefore we made these historic peace agreements in record time, because now we were no longer bound by
Same
the
thing with us. We are doing capitalism to a little degree, and that is why we are already doing great peace treaties and friendships with other countries who would have thought of us otherwise as enemies. It's the same game. Do that capitalism a little more, and we will be able to do these things a little more.
Palestinian straitjacket that you're familiar with in Toronto and in New Zealand and so on. The Arab world is not there. Some of it is, but a lot of it is changing. And so my idea is, how do you solve the Palestinian problem? Anytime they want to truly sit down and negotiate, be my guest. I'll be happy to do that. And I've tried that in the past. But in reality, I took a different track. Instead of saying, first we'll solve the problem with the Palestinians, then we'll solve the problem with the Arab world, I actually reversed it. I said, let's go to the Arab world.
Yeah.
And let's get peace with the Arab world, and then circle back to the Palestinians. If they're ready to come before.
See, Narendra Modi is learning from the right people. Narendra Modi's advisors are observing all these histories and basically asking him to do the same thing. This is word for word what Narendra Modi has done. Can you see? Can you notice?
Fine. But if not, let's get peace with 99% and then try to make peace with the 1%, as opposed to let's try the implacable 1% and wait until we get to the other 99%. That's a complete reversal of concept. It's still being challenged. You'll see some of the old guard still saying, no, we have to, we have to go to the Palestinians before we go to the Arab.
No. Stable Pakistan is in our best interest. We must do trade with them and solve the Kashmir issue peacefully, have peace talks.
World, and we'll never get peace.
Do you have a coffee lover on your holiday shopping list? Black Rifle has all the best brewing, most exotic roasts from around the globe. All coffee is America's coffee for 10%. A pre-coffee company is veteran make with Black Rifle. 10% off com with promo code.
First of all, investigate.
Supporting veterans and America's coffee.
So I want to divide this into two tracks now. I want to first of all investigate some of the history behind the willingness of other states to support the Jewish claim to a homeland in the Middle East, because I think that's quite interesting. And then I want to speak more about the Abraham Accords, which you discussed. So one of the things that fascinates me, well, historically, but also in your book, is your discussion of the Balfour Declaration. And so that's obviously before the utter catastrophe of the Holocaust and the catastrophes the Jewish people ran into in the middle of the 20th century. By the time of the Balfour Declaration, there was some sense, at least in Great Britain, that the claim that Herzl had put forward, for example, that the Jews and the world would benefit from a Jewish homeland in the Middle East, had some validity. So why do you think that developed? And then how do you think it extended? Because you got bipartisan support for the notion of a Jewish homeland from the Americans by 1944. And then, of course, there was the UN 1947 Declaration. So it's not as if the Jews imposed this vision on the Middle East by themselves. There was support all over the world. And so could you walk us through how that support developed, and why you think it developed?
Yeah, it developed because in certainly in the 19th century, in the early 20th century, there was the propaganda that I've described, rewriting history, had not taken root. And most educated people knew the history of the Bible, the history of the Jewish people, their dispossession, what they thought were the horrors that the Jews suffered in their exile and dispersion, which was nothing compared to what was going to come later in the Holocaust. But that was enough for them. And they basically knew that the land was practically empty, and that, there were people there, but it was practically empty. And it made sense that both from a biblical prognostication for those who had a religious orientation, and also a humanist view, that this evil of history, this injustice of history, would be corrected, that this long-suffering people, the Jews who contributed so much to civilization and to history, and to morality, the idea of morality, it's the Ten Commandments, that became the moral code of the world, and so many other things, the birth of Christianity, many of the ideas, the moral ideas that we have, originated on these hills where I'm sitting in right now, this tiny, dusty edge of Asia, where this tribe, strange tribe, lived here and talked about, the fact that people should not remain slaves, that there should be a law.
All these tribes, Banu Sulaim, countless tribes named with Banu. Okay, I forgot all the names. all these are mentioned in Sitaram Goel's 100 or 100 small, this tiny thin book, okay, called Islam vis-a-vis Hindu temples. There Sitaram Goel basically gives the history of all these Jewish tribes who were basically had every kind of bad adjective that you can think of, that was done to all these Jewish tribes in these lands. And you can read about that in Sitaram Goel's this thin book.
Applies to all of them, that kings are not divine, that they're subject to moral authority and censure and all sorts of other crazy ideas like that. It's all originated here. And so the educated leaders.
Okay, RSB, here I disagree with you almost 100%, because not only did they not kick out Marxists in metaphor, because they are also Marxists, they're too uneducated to know that what they are doing is also Marxism. Okay, so ideologically they did not kick out Marxism at all. What they did kick out were a few members of the CPIM party, okay, and if they did not kill those people, those guys would have been happily today Trinamool's own gundas, okay, nothing more than that. And all the non-violent gundas of CPIM that they killed, they did not deserve to be killed. Just because you're Marxist doesn't mean you deserve to be killed. Okay, by that definition, almost 90% of Bengalis deserve to be killed. Okay, so they did not kick out or kill off Marxism in any way, in any significant meaning of the sentence.
That met in World War I after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, they had to decide, who gets what. And they came upon the idea of self-determination, that is, that people should have, the ability to govern their nations, obviously with civic rights for other peoples living in their midst. And they concluded, knowing the history that I just described, that is so unknown today on college campuses and among so-called intellectuals or anything but that, that the Jews deserved this right to rebuild their national life and their ancestral homeland. And that's how it developed. But the first one to actually bring it forward, you mentioned at the beginning of your comments, was Theodor Herzl. Theodor Herzl was a giant of history. He was a journalist. He was a Jewish journalist in the late 19th century. He was born in Hungary, but worked for a very prestigious paper in Vienna. When he was dispatched to Paris as a correspondent, he saw the infamous Dreyfus trial, where a Jewish officer in the French army was falsely accused, as it later turned out, of espionage and betrayal, and was sentenced to Devil's Island and other horrible things. And he said this: if this can happen to the Jews in the apex of Western civilization, then it can happen anywhere. And he predicted that within a few decades, the fires of anti-Semitism would consume the Jews of Europe, that they would be slaughtered. He actually saw that. He wrote these things in 1900 roughly and before. And of course, the Holocaust came less than half a century later. And he said there's only one solution for this. The solution is to have the Jews, the solution is not going to be to integrate the Jews in societies, because that's not going to work. The solution would not be to eliminate nationalism through communism and other cosmopolitan internationalism. That's not going to work either. And in fact, he was right, because so much of anti-Semitism came from Stalin.
Because both those things, internationalism, communism, or integrating into other societies, okay, for example, Indian Hindus are rich, successful, educated, and contributing to the societies where they are going in. But if their integration has to come at the cost of them forgetting their religion, absolutely, then that integration is not good. Okay, and that's what a lot of Hindu NRIs have done. That's not what Jews have done. And the other thing, that internationalism, communism, Arundhati Roy's global citizen bullshit, that also comes at the cost of Hinduism and Hindu ethos and culture, so to speak. We can't afford to let that go. After all these things, after all our ancestors died for, okay, they literally died for not being converted from Hinduism. After that, we can't now let go of our Hindu identity because of some misconstrued notion of having peace in the entirety of the globe. That's not going to happen today. I'm basically predicting that will not happen. It cannot happen. Even if you let go of your Hindu identity, even then you will not have world peace.
Stalinism and so on, okay? It's not merely Nazism, it's Stalinism too. So either thing, it's not going to work. He said there's only one solution. the Jews should have a nation of their own, that is, a country of their own. And he sought to persuade first the German Kaiser.
And they had their own Jewish nation, which is not secular, where non-Jews are going and working and studying happily and living happily. So where is secularism word as a whole in a constitution being necessary for a society to practice actual secularism as it is supposed to be?
And after that, the Ottoman Sultan in Istanbul to give the Jews a state of their own, and he didn't succeed. He died after 8 years, that's it, 8 years. But in these 8 years, he launched this movement that turned the dream of ages, century after century, next year in Jerusalem. He turned it from a prayer, from a dream, into a practical plan. My grandfather, Nathan Milikovsky Netanyahu, he was enthralled by Herzl. He became a tremendous speaker at the age of 20. Thousands of people crowded to hear him throughout Europe, Eastern Europe, Poland. There were records, press records, which I give there, how people fought each other. They broke windows. They fought physically to hear this young man speak about...
Yes, that Freemasonry bullshit. See, Freemasonry did not start with that idea, right? Freemasonry started because the Knights Templars, who were being persecuted by the Pope one fine morning and saying that find them and burn them, they decided to quit being knights in the church's army and become Masons. And that's how their religion called sect of Christianity called Freemasonry was born. And now Freemasonry is basically the what's that conspiracy theory about that triangle and that eye in the center? I forgot the name. So Swami Vivekananda was a part of that for a while. And I think near the end Vivekananda let go of that idea. And he was against this idea of a global one single religion thing. But it's still practiced in many parts of India. Many normal Indians, I think even Hindus are part of that Freemasonry group. And even I think Sadhguru gave a speech in front of the Freemasons of India. Swami Vivekananda was a member of the Freemasons. But after Swami Vivekananda perhaps thought that no, Hinduism is still better than this idea of a global religion under the umbrella of Freemasonry. Maybe they got pissed off with him. And I have a conspiracy theory which I don't speak of much because Swami Vivekananda did die a bit mysteriously. Based on Hindu theology, that was a perfectly understandable way to go. But who knows how things work? Who knows what powers Freemasons have?
The Jewish about Herzl's vision.
Illuminati, yes. So Freemasonry is what people think of as Illuminati. So that is the Illuminati that Vivekananda was part of and that Sadhguru also gave a speech in front of. Illuminati is not an actual hidden society. Illuminati is basically the Freemason society.
To the Jewish homeland. Well, Herzl died. He died too early. And his followers continued the dream even though he was dead. My grandfather was one of them. My father was one of them. But they didn't succeed. So now we fast forward. In 1917, they succeed partly because the British Empire, which now, after the defeat of the Ottomans, controlled what is now the land of Israel, decided to give the Jews a homeland. They didn't say it's state yet, but they said a homeland. It was clear it was a corridor to a state. This was met by fervent Arab opposition. By many of the Arabs who had immigrated to Israel, to what is now the land of Israel. They said, no, stop.
See, word for word, today's our problem. Hindu homeland nahi hoga. We can't have Hindu Rashtra. Who is it being opposed by? The Arab equivalents of ours.
Can't come anymore. Okay, they decided we're just going to oppose any Jewish land. And the British backed down. They backed down from the so-called promise they gave. It's called the Balfour Declaration, where they promised the Jewish homeland. They backed off. Okay, and now the Jews are stuck. They're in Europe. They can't migrate because Jewish immigration was effectively blocked by the British, who betrayed their promises to the Jewish people.
Dharma Adhyatma, Swamiji was not Freemasonry. The website mentions that he was their member, right?
And now Hitlerism rises. 1933, Hitler rises to power. My father, who later became a great historian of the Jewish people, he's all of 23 years old. And here's what he writes with the rise of Hitler. He says, Hitlerism will annihilate all the Jews of Europe, and it's racial anti-Semitism that would consume every last Jew. And the only way we can fight it is to persuade the civilized world that it is not only the Jews who will be annihilated or threatened, it's their civilization too. This young Ben-Zion Netanyahu, 23 years old, writes...
Yes, and he was so right in his prediction that Hitler did wipe out as many as he could. Even the Romanis, who were basically our Hindus kicked out from Rajasthan and Gujarat, their language is almost 100% same as Hindi and Sanskrit. Okay, their kind of national anthem is called Gelem Gelem. Okay, I'm going. That's basically Bengali. Okay, so they were also oppressed and tortured as much as Jews, but of course the Jews who were then facing this situation then survived those situations, then sort of recreated their institutions and structures in different places, created their lobby, etc. Then when they wrote their own histories, they absolutely eliminated the sufferings of Romanis as well. So I guess you can blame them to a certain extent for not giving any attention to their fellow countrymen who were also oppressed in the same way, just because they were not Jew.
1933, if more people had heeded what he wrote, then perhaps we would have avoided a tremendous catastrophe that occurred to my people, but also to the 60 million who lost their lives in World War II. Well, they didn't. Now, my father saw this coming, and a few years later, he went to the United States in World War II, and he sought to recruit American public opinion. He's a young man in his early 30s. He's trying to recruit American public opinion to recognize that it's not merely for the sake of justice, doing justice with the Jews who are being incinerated in Europe. It's for American interest and Western interest to have a strong Jewish state, strong Jewish state.
See, 100% similar with India's case. It's in America's best interests to have a strong Hindu state in India. Otherwise, if Hinduism falls in India, it's another Pakistan. It's one gigantic Pakistan.
And finally, he makes his way up the ladder because one official hears him, brings him to another, because he argued something that no Jew had argued before, no Zionist leader argued before. They all argued the moral case, which we've been discussing at some length in this program. But my father, he didn't abandon the moral case. He argued it with great passion. But he turned, when he talked to statesmen, as he taught me, when you talk to public opinion, you talk about justice. And you have to argue the justice of your cause. That those who are unjust do the same, so you may as well do it to protect yourself against the people who lie, the people who cheat, or present themselves as moralists while they blow up babies deliberately, okay?
Yeah.
Speak of human rights while they trample human rights. Yeah. You have to argue justice and speak the truth. But when you speak to statesmen, as my father told me, you have to tell them, you have to speak of interest. That is what my father did. And at the end of World War II...
Well, that seems to be what you did with the Abraham Accords.
Exactly right.
That by allowing or by facilitating Israel's development into an economic powerhouse, you also made the country, you helped build the country into something that could be practically allied with, as well as, let's say, making them simultaneous.
Well, exactly. And that's really, you hit exactly on the vision, because my purpose in life, inherited from my grandfather and from my father and my fallen brother, my brother who fell while leading the most celebrated rescue mission in modern times, the historic rescue of Entebbe, where he died. I described that moment when I learned about it in some detail, and also what happened there, which is not fully known. But I inherited from them a life of purpose. And the purpose was to assure the prosperity, security, and permanence of the Jewish state, insofar as you can offer anything permanent in our world. And to do that, I realized that Israel had to be not only to fend off the false claims that try to deny its legitimacy as a state and our historic rights and our ancient homeland, but quite separate or complementing that is to make Israel very powerful, because history is very unkind.
And productive, not just powerful, right? Because the other advantage you had with the Abraham Accords was that you could present Israel as a compelling partner in economic development to Arab states that were actually hungry for a pathway forward out of their unidimensional dependence on oil wealth, for example.
Exactly right. When I say powerful, I don't mean militarily powerful, and that's exactly what I point out in the book. And I said,
now a very important part about capitalism is coming up, okay? And yes, Israelis use Hebrew for official purposes, but they are very fluent in English too. Yes, and that's my point about learning Sanskrit. I received some comments on my YouTube short that went viral about how to make Sanskrit the official language. Some of them said, do you know Sanskrit? Why are you then talking about it? If I knew Sanskrit, why would I ask other people to learn Sanskrit as well and have an institution? I would say that, see, I learned Sanskrit, and just like that you can also learn Sanskrit. No. Secondly, their argument is, no, development first. Build flyovers. We have to focus on education. Then we can focus on Sanskrit, etc. Okay, so you are going to be educated and learn Marxism. You're going to do development, someone's going to bomb your development, okay? So Sanskrit learning is absolutely possible because we all Indians know 3 languages basically. Almost every Indian knows that, okay? 3 languages. All I'm saying is replace one of that, the mainly Hindi, with Sanskrit. You have to know English. You absolutely have to know English, and you have to know your own mother tongue. And the best part is that if you know Sanskrit, you know your mother tongue even better. Or if you know your mother tongue to really great, actually great. If someone actually understands Bengali, in any Bengali who really is great in Bengali, will have a much easier time learning Sanskrit. Okay. So let's not fool ourselves into thinking that Sanskrit is a completely alien, fascinatingly different new language that we are going to have to learn, and it's completely different from Hindi, Marathi, Bengali, etc. So it's basically like learning another half a language, not a completely different, fascinatingly new, unprecedented language. So it's absolutely possible.
Normally, if you ask Israelis before that, what is powerful? Well, powerful means having a strong army. I concluded very early on, having served in the army, I served in a special unit, an elite unit, and I described my brushes with death and clandestine missions and far into beyond the lines of enemy lines, and many firefights that I was in. In one, I nearly drowned in the Suez Canal. In one, I was shot while rescuing, while taking part in a rescue of hostages in a hijacked plane, and so on. So I had intimacy with the military, obviously, because I also served for 5 years in the special unit as a soldier and officer. And it's a big adventure story, as you must have read. But I understood early on that to have military power, you have to pay for all these things.
Yes.
You have to pay for F-35 aircrafts. You have to pay for submarines.
What did we discuss just a few live streams back? That one of the reasons Nalanda might have fallen is because that place did not have great business. All the business had basically always been in Bengal and Gujarat because of them being near to the sea. And that must have been one of the reasons why the prosperity of the areas of UP and Bihar went to hell. And maybe one of the reasons was that, and maybe that led to the militaries of those places being weak, and therefore Nalanda getting destroyed, because not everything was burned down completely in India, right? But then who protected those places which were not burned down? The military. So what were the military doing in Nalanda? Maybe they did not have much prosperity. Maybe they focused so much on education that they built a Nalanda, but they did not focus on how to protect that education and development. Okay, so none of it's going to happen without free market capitalism.
For drones, for cyber, for intelligence, all very expensive. How are you going to pay for it? Oh, well, in Israel, semi-socialist Israel that I grew up in, it's very obvious. You tax the rich. Well, the problem with that is you don't have enough rich people, and they're all going to leave to other places with lower taxes. So I figure that the way you can actually enable Israel to be strong militarily is you have to make it strong economically. But to make it strong economically, you have to completely overhaul Israel's economic system from semi-socialism to free market capitalism. And I entered public life essentially with that view. And I became first prime minister, then finance minister, and again prime minister. And I led a free market revolution.
2 words, guys. 2 words from constitution needs to be kicked out as soon as possible, and most of our problems go away.
That turned Israel from basically a supplicant to one of the most advanced economies on earth.
Yeah.
Just to give you an example, when I was first elected prime minister, Israel was well behind all the Western European economies, certainly the United States and Canada, in terms of per capita income. Well, as a result of the changes that I put forward and I described in the book, Israel became, in per capita income, wealthier than Japan, France, Britain, Germany. It's actually outstripped them all. And the power, my vision was that...
Let's not forget one thing, that they still get $1 billion per year from USA. That is still there. But the USA still gives them $1 billion and they make use of that $1 billion. That's the difference between a capitalist economy and a socialist economy or a communist economy. Okay. All these Congress supporters who say that because Nehru built all the IITs, that's why so many Indians could go outside and work and send those remittances which contributed to India's economy. Nahi bhosri ke. All that remittances that were coming were being used for paying bureaucrats who were sitting down in their offices and telling people to come after 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. or go to that office. Remittances, aids, nothing can work if the economic vision of that country is not perfectly in place. look at the African continent. You can send them unlimited amount of wealth and aid, okay? Make a fucking mint in every alley in Africa. Even then Africa won't improve, because they won't stop complaining about colonization, and they won't start having good law and order and a free market economy. Without doing that, they're not going anywhere. But they won't do it. And therefore, no aid, no remittance, no Elon Musk can save Africa, and not USA's $1 billion per year could have saved Israel unless they had done capitalism themselves.
The fusion of free markets and technology, which we invest in all the time in our military, that produces this tremendous efflorescence, economic efflorescence, and that gives you the power combination. The power combination is not merely the military, which you can now afford. It's the civilian technology which you now develop. And so Arab states could see, well, Israel is a strong country, and with enough resolute leadership, it will oppose Iran that threatens both of us. But Israel also produces fantastic desalinization. Israel produces tremendous developments in energy, tremendous digital developments, tremendous developments in health, and so on. We were the first to leave COVID because of our databases that we developed for the population and so on. We were the first to exit COVID.
In artificial intelligence, there are so many great scientists today in Israel.
And rebuild our economy very quickly. So the combination of civilian technology and military and intelligence capability produced this desire on the part of the Arabs to make peace with us. And you know, the attitudes, those ingrained attitudes, anti-Israel attitudes that are still rife in the Arab world, begin to change, because here's what happened. Because I could make these peace treaties with the Gulf states, hundreds of thousands of Israelis now fly over the skies of Saudi Arabia, land in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Bahrain, and Arabs there embrace the Israelis who are coming there, and Arabs and Jews are dancing in the streets. Now they're making joint ventures together. You know, they have economic interests, but also the views, the cartoonish absurdities of Arab propaganda are dissipated with this human contact. So the new kind of peace that we have, a peace based on power and interest, is actually changing the previous assumptions about Israel in many parts of the Arab world. My goal, and I say this openly.
You see, everything Netanyahu has done, India is basically following on those footsteps, except not doing capitalism enough, because our population is, of course, bigger. It's harder to manage. And the number of leftists in India are much more, obviously, gigantically more than by percentage than Israel. So our shift is gradual, but I think Modi is following all this same playbook, basically.
Goal, if as I hope I'll form a government very soon, is to continue the expansion of the circle of peace to the rest of the Arab world. But I don't think it's going to be actually a quantum leap again, because there is a country there that is a close neighbor that is extraordinarily important, and that's Saudi Arabia. And if I can achieve a Saudi-Israeli peace, we will be well on the route of ending the Arab-Israeli conflict, and we'll be left with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. But it will be a lot more manageable, and we will have changed history. The idea is peace through strength. It's an old idea. I didn't invent it. But the strength that I'm talking about.
Yes, guys. Saudi Arabia is the most significant question today in this conflict, both in our case and Israel's case. Whose side does today Saudi Arabia once again take? Is it going to take the side of prosperity and a free society for themselves, for the long run of their country? Or are they going to do the same bullshit once again? Okay? Because just 1 or 2 weeks back, I think, 2-3 weeks back, okay, MBS gave an interview with Fox's journalist, America's right-wing news media house's journalist, and said that yes, we are heading towards a peace with Israel in the short term. Pretty soon, it is going to happen any day now. And right after that, Palestine blows up Israel, and now Saudi Arabia is going to be forced to pick a side sooner than it wanted. Either it's going to have to pick Israel, which it didn't want to do so soon, pick Israel as while it's in opposition with Palestine directly, or it will have to pick Palestine, which it didn't want to do it anyway. Someone is forcing the hands of these people, okay? Someone is forcing the hands of all of us into doing something we don't want to do, with triggering with this Palestine bombing of Israel.
About is the combination of economic, military, and diplomatic strength. I call it the 3 pillars of peace.
We'll be right back with Prime Minister-elect Benjamin Netanyahu. First, we wanted to give you a sneak peek at Jordan's new series, Exodus.
Okay.
The Hebrews created history as we know it.
You don't get away with anything. And so you might think you can bend the fabric of pay the piper. On the economic front, could you walk us through what you did on the economic front? I have two questions there. What did you do on the economic front to move Israel from a relatively far left-leaning socialist state to a free market economy? So I'd like to know the details.
Yes, Dharma Adhyatma, they have some leftists today, like Nawad Lapili, I keep forgetting his surname. So there are leftists, and their numbers are going to increase because so many of them go to USA to study, etc. They are going to be leftists after they pass out of USA. So that number is still insignificant compared to India's population of leftists, of course.
And second, why do you think that, given the radical success of your free market maneuvers, that the more socialist vision was so attractive to Israelis for such a long period of time? So let's start with the first one. So tell us what you did on the economic front to allow for the emergence of this Silicon Valley-like miracle in Israel that's unfolded over the last, about 15 years, something like that?
20 years, yes, exactly 20 years.
20 years.
Well, the first thing I did was, if I can borrow a phrase from the Clintonites, never let a good crisis go to waste. We had a tremendous economic crisis when I took over as finance minister in 2003, horrible things. And the country was still along semi-socialist lines. And I decided...
Okay, so what's the difference with India? That we had that problem 30 years from today, or 32 years from today, and we were not a semi-socialist state before that 32-year phase. We were a gigantically, horribly socialist country. From that, we are now shifting towards semi-socialism.
And most people thought it was because of the collapse of the dot-com markets, if you remember that, which it was, but it was a tiny factor of it. It wasn't a really important one. Or they thought it was because we had terrorist attacks, which was also part of it. But I thought it was a structural problem. Why were we, before the dot-com collapse, before this or that explosion of terrorism, why were we, a gifted people, people with a pretty good educational system, how come we were trailing all the countries of Western Europe?
Yeah.
And the idea was, well, education is enough. If we have good education, we'll get well. That's hogwash. I mean, the Soviet Union had...
Guys, I haven't watched the interview of this part of the interview before doing this live stream. Okay, this is the first time I'm hearing these parts as well. So I have to obviously react. You all know how much I agree with this idea. And we were discussing this particular topic for the last 2-3 days. Because Sandeep Sanyal said the same thing, word for word, to Beer Biceps. Beer Biceps said that some people say that education is the most important thing. Sandeep Sanyal said no. Education is just one more important thing. No one particular thing is the most important thing, especially maybe free market capitalism. But with education, do education and everything, all problems will solve themselves. That's hogwash. That's just what Israel's prime minister also said, okay? And commies will say that just make people educated and they will stop doing terrorism. Yeah, we know how much history backs that claim.
Tremendous education. And they had tremendous mathematicians, tremendous physicists, tremendous metallurgists. They were dirt poor. And yet when any one of these people was put on a plane and someone managed to smuggle himself to Palo Alto, they were producing wealth within days because you had a free market.
This is word for word. It seems like he's talking about India's Hindus, isn't it? See, these ideas are principle. Capitalism is a Sanatan principle, guys. It's eternal.
And had tremendous education. And they had tremendous mathematicians.
Yes, he's talking about Soviet
That's
Union.
hogwash.
And India was basically Soviet
Union. And the idea
Union
was, well, education is enough. If we have good education, we'll get well. That's hogwash. I mean, the Soviet Union had tremendous education. And they had tremendous mathematicians, tremendous physicists, tremendous metallurgists. They were dirt poor. And yet when any one of these people was put on a plane and someone managed to smuggle himself to Palo Alto, they were producing wealth within days because you had a free market there. So technology by itself doesn't produce wealth.
Yes.
Free markets and technology, free markets do produce wealth. But free markets with technology produce unbelievable spurts of growth and wealth.
And this is my problem with commies who go to USA and then say that Indians are so corrupt. So what are you saying, that you are having a white supremacist line then? That Americans are not corrupt because they are white? What the fuck is that line supposed to mean? Indians are corrupt? So everyone from every part of the world goes to US and becomes prosperous, but mysteriously their country remains poor and corrupt. So whose fault is it? It's not the fault of the economic system. It's the fault of the people who are living in that country. Indians are corrupt. Soviet Union was poor. No, it's the fault of the Marxists of those countries.
And that was my vision for Israel. I had this crisis now. And I said, in a crisis, I could do imponderable things. I could do things which were never accepted. So what I did was, I spent, first of all, I was told by my advisors, having been prime minister before, and now being a prime minister in Sharon's government, they said, who was in his 70s, they said, look, if you want to be prime minister again, whatever you do, don't take on the finance ministry because you'll have to cut budgets, you'll have to do horrible things, and you'll never be prime minister again. And I said, well, what do I want to be prime minister for? It's to push back the Iranian threat, including their quest for nuclear weapons, and to liberate the Israeli marketplace, so the Israeli economy. So if I achieve at least one of those goals, that's a pretty good thing. They said, okay, but remember, you'll never be prime minister again. This is 20 years ago, okay? I became finance minister. He used the crisis. After 3 weeks of working 20-hour days, I put forward my vision to Israel, which answers your question. I said, I fell back on a vision because people were living exactly as you say in semi-socialist Israel. They were awash with false economics, basically saying, divide the pie, don't increase the pie, okay? That was basically...
We are today in that semi-socialist phase, okay? Today we are having these conversations that Israel had 20 years back. We are just basically 20 years behind Israel, okay? In terms of economics and in terms of national identity. Even then, Israel's national identity was kind of in place, intact, right? Maybe a little more so than India has today. But our economics is basically semi-socialist today. So who knows, maybe we will have another great financial disaster and then people like Sanjeev Sanyal will be given free rein to actually give us some prosperity.
What they all grew up with, and unless you get mugged by reality, it's very hard to change it. But we were being mugged by economic reality again and again and again, and we didn't change it. Now comes my opportunity. 3 weeks into my taking up the finance ministry, I give a press conference. And I fell back on my first day in the military, in basic training. It's a long line. The company's put in a long line on a big square, and the commander points to me, and he says, you, Netanyahu, look to your right. Put the man on your right on your shoulder. I did. He then looks at the next guy, puts the guy on his right on his shoulder, and so on. Well, I had a pretty big guy on my shoulders because the commander blows the whistle. Barely took a few steps together. This is a race. It's called the elephant race. The guy at the bottom is the elephant. The guy at the top rides the elephant. The next guy was the smallest guy in the platoon in the company, and he had the biggest guy on his shoulder. He collapsed on the spot. The third guy was a big guy, and he had a relatively small guy, and he shot off like a rocket and took the race. And I said to the Israeli public, all national economies are pairs of a private sector, of a public sector, sitting on the shoulders of a private sector. The private sector is the one that produces the wealth, or most of it, okay? The added value in the economy. And in our case, the public sector became too big, and we were about to collapse. We were about to collapse like the guy next to me. So here's what we're going to do.
And our public sector is still ever increasing. Even our fun part is that our private sector is increasing and the public sector is also increasing. Because most people still fear unbridled capitalism will cause problems, okay? So we need development of developing, equitable development, sustaining development of developmental development. Now, the problem is, see, what Shangramjit Raychaudhuri is asking here, do you think Yogi can do this better? That is an impossible question to answer, okay? Because not one person in BJP today believes in the things I am talking about, except maybe Tejasvi Surya. I am just absolutely hoping he understands this because he's just a younger guy. Other than that, everyone in BJP, from Annamalai to Himanta Biswa Sharma, Yogi Adityanath, all of them are absolute socialists in their mind. My question is that how much are they willing to listen to people? Modi was, of course, a lifelong socialist, but he did listen to Sanjeev Sanyal to some degree, right? So if Yogi Adityanath will listen more, then he will do capitalism more. It's all about listening because we have no free market capitalist guy in mainstream Indian politics today. There are countless great, well-educated libertarians who would maybe be great politicians as well. I mean, successful ministers in some capacity or the other, okay? But most of our Indian libertarians are absolutely anti-Hindu. They look at free market capitalism as the commie equivalent of education, that just do free market capitalism and by magic, Pattharbaz will stop hitting you with patthar. That's their idea. That's the only problem we have today. So, which is why I'm a libertarian, but I am pro BJP, pro Narendra Modi, because I know that the direction he's taking. He's not libertarian by any means. I know he is getting towards that because he's listening to Sanjeev Sanyal. So it's a question of which next BJP Prime Minister listens to which free market economist in real life.
we're going to put the fat man, this became known as the fat man, thin man example, and taxi cab drivers and comics spoke about it. It actually went into the Israeli cycle. If you ask people now in Israel, fat man, thin man, they know what I'm talking about. The fat man at the top, okay, we're going to put it on a strict diet. Very hard to do politically. You're going to cut government budgets, okay? And the thin man...
Commies will say the fat man is Adani and Ambani. Tax the fuck out of them. Okay, even though they are the biggest employers in the country, tax them and then we will have prosperity. The rickshaw puller in your front of your house will stop driving rickshaw and will come with a Tesla in front of your house to take you to a place 6 kilometers away on with just 20 rupees. You will travel in a Tesla for 20 rupees if you just tax Adani and Ambani.
At the bottom, we're going to put a lot of oxygen in his lungs. And what is oxygen? Well, many things. But number one, number two, and number three is low taxes, low taxes, low taxes.
Yes!
Because that's why people risk, that's why they work. That's why, because they don't want to pay it to the fat man at the top. They want to have it themselves. And once we have that, we have to, the guy can race forward, right? Run forward and take the race compared to other economies. Well, not true, because as he begins to run, he hits a ditch, and then he hits a wall, and then he hits a fence. And these are called barriers to competition. We have to deregulate the excessive regulation that semi-socialist Israel had and still has to some extent, but we've done a lot there. So it's three things. Compress the fat man, lower taxes, and do other things to make business very attractive and easy, and remove barriers to competition. And frankly, that's what I did. I don't describe the 80 or so major reforms that we did, but I did them in a crisis. And the reason I could get away with it in a crisis is because, things are so bad, they were so bad that they let you do it. But I paid heavily, and I almost disappeared from politics. When I later ran for, as the leader of Likud, my party compressed to 10% of the Knesset. That's it. Right now, we're the biggest party. But I was merely destroyed. So my advisors who told me, don't take the finance ministry, weren't that wrong. I was declared dead. Having survived several brushes with death as a commando soldier, I now survived a brush with death politically. So I was eulogized. People said Netanyahu did great things in the economy, but he's dead. He's down to 12 seats out of 120 in our parliament. It's finished. Thank you for what you did. Go away. Okay? I recovered from that. And I was reelected.
So why did you pay the price? Like what?
Oh, why?
What was it about your reforms that made that price inevitable?
Because first of all, the most important part is that in order to put the fat man, the public sector, on a diet, I had to cut back Israel's lavish welfare system, which encouraged people to live on the dole and not to go out and work. Okay?
Shit.
So when I cut child allowances, which in Israel weren't.
भाई गरीब लोगों को का क्या होगा? गरीब लोगों के पास खाना नहीं है. Okay, खाने को रोटी नहीं है, पहनने को कपड़े नहीं है. How can we do this?
Extraordinary. They'd go up with each successive child. So, by the time you got to the sixth child, and you had, like the Bedouins in the Negev, they had 60 children from multiple wives. They could drive the BMW Jeep as their second car in the sands of the Negev. I mean, and this was leading to demographic...
Rising income inequality, guys. Capitalism is causing rising income inequality in India, even though the lowest guy today, his lifestyle is way better than a middle class or upper middle class 30 years back. Not upper middle class, at least middle class.
An economic collapse, okay? And the same thing was happening in other sectors, the ultra-Orthodox community and so on. They didn't work. They just had a lot of children, which the others, the private sector had to pay for. And when you cut that, well, Jordan, I can tell you don't become very popular, okay? It's not cutting government.
Well, there's a lot of short-term pain there, eh? There's short-term immediate pain that's concrete for a lot of people when you cut. And if the benefits only kick in the medium to long term, then you have obviously a problem of emotion.
Well, I'd like it
up front and the benefits later.
You're absolutely right, and you have to be prepared for that. That's what leaders do. If you want to lead, you have to have...
Okay, guys, I have to tell you of a conversation I had with two socialists in my family just yesterday or day before yesterday. I forgot. Okay, so we were coming from that surgery that my 11-plus-year-old dog had. So while coming from that surgery, we were discussing that places in Kolkata today have traffic jams which didn't have traffic jam at all just a few years back. So we were discussing why is that. We were coming from the EM bypass. Gigantic metro constructions are going on. So one of the people I was with starts saying that, see, so many people today these days go to dine out and stuff, at nights or on weekends, and so many restaurants have come up. That's why all these traffic jams are happening. So I was finally relaxed that the surgery went well, thanks to all of our prayers, perhaps. So I was saying that, see, so many people are going on dine outs. So many people are becoming travel vloggers. So many people are opening restaurants, which is restaurant business is officially the toughest business to sustain in the whole world. Okay, and that business is sustaining and thriving to such a gigantic degree in India, in almost every state. Okay, especially in even commie socialist West Bengal. Okay, where the GDP growth rate is just 10%, 8 to 10%. West Bengal's GDP growth rate is 8 to 10%, which is not very high. Okay, India's GDP growth rate is 8%, but UP, Gujarat, their growth rate is 18%, 19%. Okay, UP is the highest, 19% GDP growth rate. We have just about 8 to 10% growth rate, and even then, so many businesses are now thriving. Even after giving so much that cut money to local Trinamool politicians, even after that they are sustaining, okay, because of the people who are coming to eat there, okay. So, and after all this, we are supposed to think, so many bad things are happening to the poor people of the country because of Ambani, Adani, and BJP selling the country off to Ambani and Adani, okay. That's what's going on. So everyone's taking risks. Everyone's becoming entrepreneurs. Everyone's becoming a travel vlogger. Everyone's becoming a YouTuber. Everyone's going to dine out. A term I didn't even hear up until 10, 15 years back. All these things are happening. Everyone has money to do these things. But we are worse off because of BJP, guys. Okay? That's what's going on. So I used to work in an office where there were many voiceover artists. Now that company has almost shut down. And only 2 voiceover artists remain. One of them is thinking that I will quit my job beforehand because I might get fired anyway, and do what? Open a food joint. What the fuck? What kind of sad, poor society is this? So I said all this to my socialist family members, and they said that, see, not everyone is going for dine outs, right? So I had to tell them that, Arey, how can everyone do everything? What are you talking about? That there will be 0 poor people. By any standard of even English grammar, someone will be poorer than the other unless we are talking about complete equality of wealth and income. And how can that happen? Only in Sudan, where people are equally poor except 2-3 families at the top, which we kind of had in the entirety of India before 1991. So if your argument is that there are still some poor people in India who don't go for dining out, yes, then I can't argue with you, because that's not a society that can ever occur. Okay, our question is, can that poor person become a middle class or an upper class? Or does that poor person starve to death? Or does he have a phone in his hand? That is the question we are talking about. I'm not bothered about having poor person in the country, okay? Poor people in the country. No country ever can have everyone driving a Tesla, okay? And then, my driver also said that, see, not everyone is going around dining out. Then, a few minutes later, we asked him, so how's your Durga Puja shopping going on? He says, I don't have time to go to shopping because I have so much work, because of so many driving assignments. I'm driving so many people here and there. Okay, how is that happening? No one has money. Everyone's poor. BJP is killing the country. Only Adani and Ambani is becoming poor. Adani and Ambani are the only people who are becoming rich. Everyone's becoming poorer. Rising in income inequality. But my driver doesn't have time to do puja shopping because he's driving so many people. All those people have the money to pay this driver. Okay, so many people have the money to open food joints, to go and eat at food joints, but the country is going to hell because of Ambani and Adani.
Have a purpose, and your purpose has to be beyond yourself, and you have to be ready to shed political blood, your own. You have to be ready, otherwise you can't lead. Otherwise it's meaningless. You're always looking at the polls, you're always looking. Do you have a vision of what to do? I had a clear vision. And I wanted to make Israel a power among the nation.
Yeah, Devjyoti is saying something important. Restaurants and pubs are basically the only business, and that too in Kolkata mainly, not even the rest of Bengal. But even then it's happening in Kolkata, right? And that's absolutely happening because Shubhendu Adhikari is breathing down Mamata Banerjee's neck, okay? If BJP hadn't put so much pressure that, I'm coming, I'm right behind you, I'm almost there. Without that, Bengal wouldn't have seen this 8 to 10% GDP growth rate. No fucking way, okay? Because why is it happening only in the last 2-3 years? Why didn't it happen since 2011? It's absolutely because of BJP.
And the things, and I paid for it, and I nearly died politically. In fact, I was eulogized twice because you got to realize that I checked, somebody showed me the statistics the other day. So I'm the longest serving prime minister of Israel, 15 years. And in a year, if I, as I anticipated, will form a government in a few days, in a year's time, I will be the longest serving leader of a democratic country in the last half century. But I'm already beating the odds in a different way, because a lot of people came back once from political death. That's happened. Winston Churchill is an example. Yitzhak Rabin of Israel, the late Yitzhak Rabin was another example, and you can find them in other places. Not that often, but you can find them. But the last time somebody came back twice, to do a comeback twice, was 75 years ago, 3/4 of a century ago. And the reason that's happened is because you're quite right. If you're able to survive political death, then people appreciate what it is you did for the country and for them. Even though, you could be swept by tremendous hostile press, as in the case in Israel, but you can overcome that. And in Israel's case, in my case, in the story of my life as I describe it, it was to bring into effect this vision of Israel, of a powerful state that has this tremendously creative economy, along with a powerful military, opening its...
Okay, guys, see, Showman Balti and Abhay Agarwal, even though he's not Bengali, he knows Bengali fluently because he has lived in Bengal for all his life. What these two people are saying, and even now Sangramjit Rai Chaudhary, all of them are, what they are saying, I 100% agree with. It's not that me and my viewers agree on anything 100%. This is one of those things, guys, because they understand the Bengali ethos to that extent. Yes, Bengalis are extremists in everything for some weird reason. Yes, so when Bengalis do Hindutva, it's the end of Islamism, maybe in the entire country. And for example, even me in free markets and in terms of libertarianism, I'm pretty extreme.
Opening the door to peace with its neighbors, and also fighting what is a global threat. Iran, with nuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic missiles that can reach Canada and the United States and anywhere, is a threat to all of humanity. And by protecting Israel, by fending them off, I of course protect Israel.
Dharmadhyatma, when Bengalis become Hindutvadi capitalists, it's going to be the death of all opposing voices, because there are going to be no structures and institutions left to counter Hindutva and capitalism.
I think we protect the larger international community. People appreciate that. That's why I'm sitting with you a few days before I expect to go back into office, because we can have this free-ranging conversation now. I can talk about my book, which I unabashedly am trying to plug in this conversation, and I urge you to read it for two reasons. One, as you say, to understand better the history of the Jewish state, the Jewish national movement, Zionism, that led it, the reality of the Middle East and how it's changing, by the way, for the better, the threat of Iran, all of these things, and my contacts with the successive American presidents, who are very different from one another, and I've had to deal with quite a few of them, and it's an interesting story. But I think beyond that, I think it's to live
See, after this we are going to discuss Obama also. This is going to be fun.
a life of purpose.
Okay, well, you had to be guided by and have faith in principles that were outside of short-term advantage in order to do what you did. And that's the story that you lay out in your book, and that seems to be in accordance with the facts on the ground. When you, in your political experience, no doubt you've dealt with political leaders who have a vision and who are abiding by principles, and then you have dealt with political leaders who don't. And one of the questions I have for you as a consequence is, what is it that you think that the leaders who aren't guided by principle and vision, what is it that they're pursuing? And in your experience, is that more common on the political front than guidance by vision and principle?
In general, yes, it's more common. And that's why people don't have high respect for politicians. They speak of principle, but they're usually interested in personal power. For me, power by itself is meaningless. Power for what? I mean, I can make a better living outside.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Yeah. Well, that's exactly what I'm asking. I don't understand the drive for power, so to speak, or authority or influence outside of the realm of guiding principle, because it like if it's just a shallow hedonism, let's say, or a desire for acclaim, I would think also there's easier and more productive ways of pursuing that.
I certainly agree with you. You're right, because Israeli politics isn't exactly a walk in the woods. I mean, or a rose garden. It's very cruel. And my family and myself were subjected to incredible calumny and slanders and lies. It's horrible. So unless you have an overriding purpose, there's no point. To come back twice from political death, to have been eulogized, usually unfavorably, you don't come back for the perks of power, which are absurd anyway. I mean, anybody who can learn a living will do better than what heads of state get in the Western world. They're forced into it's nothing. I mean, believe me, you get better accommodations when you're in the private sector. So that's not the reason. For me,
Right.
as I said, I've lived a life of purpose to revamp, to assure Israel's permanence. My father and my grandfather worked very hard, labored very hard to assure that the Jewish people would come back, would have a state. And I worked very hard to assure that they'd keep a state and that state would become a power among the nations. By the way, the University of Pennsylvania has this annual poll in which they asked 17,000 opinion leaders in, I think, 20 countries to rank the powers of the world. And in the decade that I led Israel, between 2010 to 2020, Israel was consistently ranked as the 8th power in the world. Now you got to understand, we're 1/10 of 1% of the population of the world. You know, we're going to reach 10 million soon. Ahead of us, our country is with a billion people, hundreds of millions of people, tens of millions of people, and below is the same. But we stand out, this tiny, tiny country. And the reason that's so is because I put this vision that is my purpose in life into being, but it's the jury's still out. It's not that you can sit on your laurels. I can't say, oh, well, and I'm coming back in. I've done it. I wrote my biography or my autobiography. That's it. No. You have to constantly work at it. You have to constantly increase the economic power, increase the innovation, increase the circle of peace, expand it, and block those who would trample us. And it's not automatic. It's not obvious that history will be kind to the good. It's not true. History has been kind to the bad. History has been kind to the worst people.
Yes.
I mean, Genghis Khan ruled a good chunk of the world for over a century and created horrible, terrible horrors. The Roman Empire, you could judge it this way or that way, but they ruled through the force of arms and subjugation for centuries, okay? The history, Martin Luther King said the arc of history bends towards justice. Maybe so, but that arc is very brittle and it could be broken by the darkest
And there's
forces.
lots of variability.
Lots of
This is some great articulation, great language, great choice of words and phrases, guys.
variabilities. And right now, the darkest force in our immediate vicinity is this horrible regime in Tehran, in Iran, that everybody can see its horrors, what it's doing to those incredibly brave men, incredibly brave women who are dying on the streets there. And that, if I say that the arc of history will bend towards catastrophe, if these ayatollahs, these thugs, these theological thugs would have nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them to every part of the earth. So I've made it my life's mission, so far successful, to prevent them from having that. But it's an ongoing thing. The jury is still out. There are many things. It's not guaranteed.
Right. Well, part of the reason you were able to offer something attractive to the Arab countries